Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Customize Your Success Summit. I am very excited to have Zachary Ames with us today. Zachary is an award-winning leadership and talent development expert. With nearly 15 years of experience in startups, Fortune 500, and global private companies, there are very few challenges that he hasn't faced already. Combining his years living abroad in Singapore, a decade in New York, and his humble roots of Salt Lake City, Zachary brings a global approach with a localized sensibility. In that time, he's reorganized entire business units, developed enterprise-wide leadership curriculum, rolled out global diversity initiatives, coached executives, and built multiple development programs. Most recently, Zachary founded XYZ Leadership, where he helps his clients future-proof their business, their leaders, and their careers, focusing on communication, adaptability, and diversity. He's also the founder and co-chair of Forefront, the premier leadership accelerator for coaches and talent development professionals, which is supported by 100 Coaches and Marshall Goldsmith. And that's where Zachary and I actually met, as I am part of Forefront with him. So when he isn't building better leaders for the world or hosting his podcast, Expand Your Zone, Zach can be found skiing with Perfect Powder or hiking with his chocolate lab, Cooper. So Zach, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And yes, I was actually just up in the mountains yesterday. We've got a very late spring storm, and it's just been a wonderful few months here.
It sounds amazing. You know, I'm in Southern California, so I don't quite get that, but would love it. Hey, Zach, so you and I have chatted about this a bit, and I would love for you to share with the audience. So when you were growing up, what was your definition of success? What were you taught? What did you pick up along the way?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because one of the things that we were discussing just before was, it was interesting as I was thinking on that question, even in preparation. There is, of course, the more professional perspective where we've all seen the quotes, and you could list a famous person and here's the quip of what success is. When I really dug into it and started thinking about it further, a lot of it was somewhat unspoken and very cultural. So as I said, or as you mentioned in the biography, I'm born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. The first thing, even when I was living in New York, I would say I'm from Utah. I would just jump in and say, and yes, meaning I knew the next question was, are you Mormon? So I was born and raised in a very conservative religious household, which was wonderful. Many of my values are still tied and rooted in much of that. But what that led to also was this sense of a very clear definition of what success or what your life was meant to be. That at 19 as a male, I was supposed to go on a mission. Shortly thereafter, many of even my fraternity brothers in college, they were actually married before they graduated college. Some of them even had kids. And it was to start this life of a very particular family unit very young. On the other side of that was to be, well-versed academically, to go on to great career success, whatever that might be. And I kind of fit all that really well. I was a go-getter. I was type A, high-achieving, Eagle Scout before I was 16. And, I knew at the age of like 8, I wanted to be a gastrointestinal pediatric surgeon. And that was going to be my life. And I knew that, like I said, at 8, it was very clear. So yeah, that was kind of the definition of success. Was a bit of a poster child of high-paid doctor, wife and kids, and a beautiful picket fence. And, yeah, that was kind of the image or the idea in my head growing up.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us have that idealistic image, or the very cookie cutter sometimes.
Yeah, very much
right? So for you now, though, what does success mean to you? And has your definition evolved since then?
Well, I can tell you I'm not a gastrointestinal pediatric surgeon. I am not married. I think the only part of that equation, I'm actually, after all of my international time and experience, my time in New York, I've actually returned back to Utah. It's really interesting to have this conversation and see where life has taken me. Recently just got a house that we're renovating, and I do have the cliche chocolate lab, which is kind of the poster child of dogs here. But that said, my journey was very different. So as I was supposed to go on that church mission, basically came out to the, equivalent of kind of a priest within our church, and was not allowed to go. And my whole world got turned upside down. And it was one of those that everyone expected it. Again, I was the kind of shining star kid, and there was a question, why wouldn't you go? And so having, come out and starting to lead a different life and understand what that is, it upended everything that was that perfect white picket fence house. My entire framework of life, not just success, but life, started to really crumble. And as difficult as it was, I've always said, I'm actually very grateful for that moment, because it has allowed me to do exactly what you've said, is recreate my own definition. And I would, I think it's one of those where it doesn't mean that there aren't things that are given to us in our families and communities that still allow us to become great, of course. But there's also something very unique and special about giving yourself that gift and being able to say, this is how I want to live my one, true precious life. And so a lot of that has allowed me to do many of the things that I've done. So I noted, right, because part of that Eagle Scout and everything, I was facilitating and doing leadership junior, conferences and going to camps. And I didn't even know what I do now was a career. I was just doing it for fun. And I watched my father, who was a brilliant architect, but there were definitely times when he was a partner in the firm that our family was struggling, right? We made sure the employees were paid before we were, and my mom was a coupon queen, and we never went without, but it definitely was tight at times. And so I knew I needed the business side as well, not just go follow my bliss, whatever that would have been, but how do I accomplish that through business? And so I took a pivot. I didn't study pre-med or any of those types of things, and really threw myself into this world of leadership, talent development, which led me on to this big, wild journey of living in New York, living in Singapore, and becoming really a global citizen, and really shaping and exploring what could be in life. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. I love that. It's definitely not a gastroenterologist. That's not what you're doing. But so it sounds like you really just took this passion that you had for leadership, which wasn't an intentional thing, but you realized it was in your heart and it's a calling for you, and shaped really the path that you're on now. So can you think of, were there any pivotal moments or a pivotal moment along your journey that you said, yeah, this is what I want, I'm committing to it, and no matter what, I'm going to make it happen?
It's interesting. I don't know that there's a moment that made me say that, but there were definitely moments when I could have said otherwise. That's actually one of the things when I talk to alumni, or especially students, and some of those moments, what I found critical was that when I was in New York, so I graduated at the height of the great financial crisis, 2008, moved to New York with a one-way ticket, and was going to just try it, right? Feels very kind of movie-esque of, I'm going to go do this thing. And the crisis happened. My roommate was actually with Lehman Brothers at the time, got spun out of that, luckily, but we were just waiting every day for him to get his pink slip, and nobody in New York City was hiring. So I was going and knocking doors, trying to be a waiter. I started working retail, even at Banana Republic, just to pay my rent. But I knew I was committed to not only being in New York City, but I was committed to this career. And when people would ask me, what is it that you are looking for? It would have been really easy to say, oh, I'll take anything, right? Do you have an account rep job at this thing? Or can I be a temp over here? And I was very specific in saying the thing that I wanted. And in hindsight, of course, this is where the magic came from, was when I would say, oh, I want to do leadership and talent development, or I want to work in OD. And there's a lot of acronyms out there. People would then, instead of going, oh, you can go and do anything, I was narrowed in, and people went, oh, I know so-and-so. Or there was a professor even at Fordham who said, oh, I actually teach communications. I'm working with the client on this. Would you want to come and help me write their sales workbook? And so I started picking stuff up slowly and surely. And then I even had a moment where I was speed dating. And it was funny, we hit it off because we weren't talking about anything in career, which is one of the first things you say in New York is, what do you do? We just talked about our love of New York and Broadway and a bunch of other things. And it wasn't until after I was like, oh, what do you do? And he was an HR director, actually, at one of my first big corporate jobs. And it just turned out that, he said, oh, we actually have an assistant manager position that just opened up, and I was able to cut my teeth that way. And so there wasn't a moment that made me say it, I think, but it was just something within me. As you said, I have always felt this passion and calling to the world of leadership. I believe leaders make a massive difference. And so I just kept saying it, and stuff just kind of kept showing up for me because I was committed to the thing I wanted to do.
Yes, absolutely. Committed and laser focused because you knew, right?
Yeah.
And then doors opened up. So people go, oh, I know somebody. Oh, I have an opportunity.
Yeah. And I'll say this also, that laser focus was still broad, right? I knew the industry, I knew the general terms, and I wasn't overly picky. I've seen other people do the opposite, where they're so picky. And, I was even told I couldn't be a coach in those early days because I didn't have the gray hairs, which in hindsight, I get. You're not going to tell a 23-year-old to come and be your, business coach.
Right.
So I did have to still work my way up and be the coordinator and then the assistant manager, et cetera. But I did know the general idea, the general industry, the world, to go and cut my teeth and get put in my reps so that I can be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not an easy pathway, right? A lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And they think it's from point A to point B, linear and done. And that is just not how it works out, especially if you're creating your own thing, right? Carving your own pathway. It's going to be a little windy. So for you, like along this pathway, knowing this is what you wanted to do, did you ever have any moments where you just second guessed or you just questioned yourself? And if so, what did you do to get back on track?
There's been a few of those moments. And I don't know that they were overly particular, right? I think it's anyone in the corporate job. So I did do the corporate thing for many, many years. And whether it's that you've kind of feel like you've done everything that the role has, or you try to apply for a promotion and someone else gets it. Like we've all had those moments where we kind of go, wait, is this what I want to do? Should I be doing this? And especially in those days of more or less unemployment, right? Really going, anything is possible. Or part of this line of work is I coach people all the time. What's possible? What would you want to do? And so sometimes I even go down that, not in a sad, like, oh, I don't like this, but what else could there be, right? Am I too laser focused? So I've definitely had those moments of like, oh, maybe I'll go follow this passion, or here's a fun thing I could go do. And then I always just kind of wind myself back and go, is that really what you want to do? And more importantly, I think it is that mix too of like, is this what you're really good at? Is this one of your gifts? And I don't know the term off the top of my mind, but there is kind of that Japanese idea of like what you're good at, what the world's needs, and what you can get paid for, or whatever those Venn diagrams that you see out there. And I think for me, I am actually very uniquely square in the middle of that when it comes to speaking and facilitating and coaching. And so if I ever have that moment of like, maybe I go do something else, or there's an itch that needs to be scratched, trying to figure out, okay, how do I maybe play in a different lane, but still within my business or within the industry? Do I just need to challenge myself more? Do I need a break? Whatever it is. But yeah, I'm by no means going to go and become a photographer. I've kind of also set limits to myself on the other side of it of, you can do anything in this world, but at the same time, it's also been really helpful to say, no, you're not going to go do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it comes down to alignment, right? Just because something is of interest doesn't mean it's aligned with who you are and what you want to bring to the world.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's great. Now, for anybody who's thinking about, hey, I want to make a shift, whether that is, I just want to show up differently or at the next level in my current job, in my current situation, or no, I'm feeling like I really want to make a shift out of this situation into something new. What would you say to them is most important to focus on for them to get to that next level to customize their own success?
I think there's a couple approaches to that. Some people are clear, and I will say I'm one of those people. I think I was very lucky that once I kind of tapped into this thing I wanted to do, it was more a question of how, and I was open, as you said, to that winding road. I knew the destination, but I allowed the journey to be mixed. So some of my coaching clients, they know that. It's very clear what they like to do and what they don't want to do. So if that's the case, then it is just a matter of, like I was saying, even for myself, do we need to increase the challenge? Do we need to just change the location? Or there's a lot of different things we can do if we already have that piece in mind. Like, what is the next step? I also work with and coach people who don't know. And I think one of the challenges sometimes of people within our world who, say, find your passion and money will follow, or find your passion and that's the most important thing, or alignment is the key to everything. And it feels like this wonderful mantra. And at the same time, it also sometimes becomes a burden to people who don't feel they have it. And so what I often talk about, and it's actually the name of not just the podcast, but it's what XYZ Leadership is short for, is expand your zone. The idea being, go and try something. I think all too often we think that there is some sort of commitment that we have to make forever if we take a new step or a new direction. And we often forget that we can not only take the leap, but we are the person who lands. And we get so worried about what's on the other side of something. And I've also seen people who have gone back and said, you know what, I did try that thing and I actually hate it. And I can go right back in. And I'll tell you, even for myself, starting my own company, that was part of what I know a lot of people were scared about, was like, oh, the shame if I have to go back and live and get a corporate job. For me, that was the greatest safety net I could have had, was if I go try this thing and I fail, right? And I had numbers and everything in my head. I knew what the percentage of my salary I wanted to make in a certain percentage of time. And if I didn't hit those marks, I was going to go look at LinkedIn and try to go get a corporate job doing what I already knew I was going to be successful at. Luckily, I've not had to, but that's the same thing, is it's okay to go and try. And I think sometimes, obviously, depending on the pressures you have or where you are in your career, there's certain risk factors to consider. But I think all too often we take those and we blow them up and we think that they're detrimental. And the reality is, rarely does anyone retire from the next job you're going to get. Right? Like, there's still a lot of steps that we can take, and we can evolve and we can adapt, and we can take the good of this and the bad of that and create something completely new, or we can take a step back and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Not every step is a forever step.
No, my heavens. I had a quick little story. When I was at, so my first corporate job in New York was at Bloomingdale's, and I ran their intern program. And we had this young woman who had worked in the accessories department for one of the big major magazines. And so she just assumed she was going to be either in accessories or ready to wear or something fun, bright, and sparkly and fashion. And the first day, everyone opens up their folders, and she was assigned to the home department and was just in tears. Uh-huh. And I won't go into all the detail of how we kind of got her over that hump, right? We have really beautiful furniture. This isn't, Sammy's furniture outlet or something. But the other big piece, I remember my biggest takeaway from that was like, no one is asking you to retire as the president of the home store in 40 years. And for this, it was an 8-week internship. And it's been a really pivotal moment for me to apply to my own life. But that's where all that sentiment of the advice comes from, is like, this is not forever. These are not death sentences, right? Yes. We can adapt and change and make moves. You make this move, it means you can make another move.
And how freeing is that when that is your mentality and your mindset, that whatever this next step is, it's a stepping stone. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the 40-year journey. I'm stuck here. Right. I Absolutely. Think that's so brilliant. And just try something different.
Yes.
Right? If it's not working,
And even within our own businesses, right? For anyone who has started their own thing, or anyone, there was an old CEO I used to work for, and that was the thing he would say at the end of every year. He'd go through the end of year report and stuff, but then he would always say, so next year's coming, you may have the exact same job title. I expect none of you to have the same job. And the meaning behind it was that you should challenge yourself. You should be trying to do bigger and better and different. That if you end up at the end of a career and you're doing the same stuff, that's not good for the company. That's probably not good for business, but more importantly, it's just not good for you. We all need to bring a little bit of spice into our work, even if it is the exact same job, the exact same title, the exact same business.
Yeah, that's where the growth and the development comes in. So,
absolutely.
So good. Thank you, Zach, so much for all of your insights. It's been brilliant. And I know there's been so many nuggets that folks have taken away from this. I certainly have. So thank you for sharing with us. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we will see you next time.